Yo, what's going on, guys? It's J-Mass, and I'm back again with another dope New England adventure. And finally, after many years of getting requests to film a video at this place, I'm going to be doing just that in this video. We're finally going to be checking out the ruins of Fort Rodman and Fort Taber here in Fort Taber Park in the beautiful coastal city of New Bedford, Massachusetts, situated along Massachusetts' south coast. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been to Fort Taber Park many times in the past, probably about a dozen times by now. I absolutely love it here. It's a public park with many abandoned military fort ruins to come and check out. You can already see a couple of them behind me. I mean, you got an amazing historic concrete battery right here, and then, of course, Fort Rodman right over there. There's a lot to see at this park, and I love it. Again, been many times. But I've never filmed a video here, and I've gotten many requests over the years to do just that, and rightfully so. I mean, I've covered so many other abandoned military forts across New England, actually, here on this channel. But Fort Taber Park was a glaring one that I was missing. So we're going to change that today. We're finally going to be coming over here and filming a video and delving into everything regarding Fort Taber Park. The ruins of Fort Rodman, Fort Taber, everything that's left behind here. I'm really excited to finally come with you guys, check it out, film a video here. We're going to be delving more into the history and details as we do it. But basically what you need to know is that this park is comprised of two major forts. Fort Taber, which actually was built in 1861, and Fort Rodman, which began construction in 1857, just a few years prior. They basically existed symbiotically, but Fort Rodman was always the primary fort here at this park. Even though it's called Fort Taber Park, it really was Fort Rodman that, was the major epicenter here. But regardless, we'll get into all that history soon. We're going to be exploring Fort Taber Park here in beautiful coastal New Bedford, see what it has going on. So join me as we delve into the history, see all the ruins there are, and just hyped to finally get over here and film a video here after many years of requests. So let's do it. Let's check it out. Fort Taber Park. The story of both Fort Rodman and Fort Taber begins all the way back in 1857, when construction on what would soon become Fort Rodman was just starting. Initially, it was simply known as the Fort at Clark's Point, in reference to Clark's Point, the very southern tip of New Bedford where the fort was situated. However, while this fort was in the midst of construction, the American Civil War broke out in 1860. To defend the city of New Bedford from potential wartime naval attacks during Fort Rodman's construction, a smaller earthworks fort was built nearby in 1861, known as Fort Taber, named for the city's then mayor, Isaac C. Taber. Possessing 6 total cannons, Fort Taber was manned up until 1863, when the still under construction stone fort, Fort Rodman, was garrisoned. Although very little of Fort Taber exists today, you can still see a stone outline marking one of its former buildings, directly in front of Fort Rodman's entrance. Specifically, this outline was once home to a wooden officers' quarters. The earthworks, however, were removed. Although construction had first begun in 1857, the primary stone fort for Fort Rodman was still being constructed well into the 1860s. Plans for the fort were much larger, with 4 levels of cannon emplacements anticipated, but only 3 were ever built. By 1871, construction had ceased entirely, and the fort, sometimes referred to as the Old Stone Fort, stood at 3 levels with 72 cannon emplacements, not entirely completed according to plan. The fort was built entirely out of locally sourced granite, with all excess granite being used to build a seawall along Clark's Point. When walking around this fort, you'll notice a myriad of slits and holes in the walls for cannons and artillery, pointing out in every direction. The fort was situated directly at the mouth of the Acushnet River, the entrance to New Bedford Harbor, allowing troops to sweep the coast for enemy fleet before they could ever enter the city's waters. By 1898, major changes would come to the fort, thanks to the Endicott Program. In response to the outbreak of the Spanish-American War that same year, the U.S. government demanded that the nation's eastern coastal fortifications be improved, renovated, and modernized for effective defense. Passed by the Board of Fortifications, this period of coastal defense refurbishment, known as the Endicott period, directly affected Fort Rodman, resulting in a sudden explosion of construction on the site. The property was officially named as the Fort Rodman Military Reservation by the U.S. Army, named in honor of New Bedford native Lieutenant Colonel Logan Rodman. It became the primary military fortification of the coast defenses of New Bedford, a network of coastal forts surrounding the city and its harbor, and it was soon garrisoned by the United States Army Coast Artillery Corps. During the upgrades brought by the Endicott period, 5 new batteries were constructed on the site between 1898 and 1902, which we'll go through one by one. The first battery constructed was Battery Walcott, built in 1899 and named for William H. Walcott. This battery had a disappearing 8-inch M1888 gun and was located to the northeast of Fort Rodman. This is also the first battery that you see when parking at Fort Taber Park, making it one of the most visited batteries on the property. Several rooms and halls are open to the public, although I recommend you exercise caution while exploring them as they're very dark and the floor is covered in loose debris. There are a few different entryways inside as well. That being said, Battery Walcott is only one of 3 batteries with an accessible interior. Also constructed in 1899 was Battery Barden, named for William Barden. This battery also had a disappearing 8-inch M1888 gun and was located to the west of Fort Rodman. Battery Barden also has an accessible interior, but it is much trickier to enter. You must crawl inside a narrow, exposed entryway on top, beside the gun mount. Much like the previous battery, the interior of this one is extremely dark and sketchy, littered with debris. I also found remnants of a potential squatter's den inside, which was a bit creepy. This was also my first time venturing inside this battery, as I'd only ever seen it from the outside. Battery Cross was constructed in 1902, named for Charles E. Cross. This battery had 2 pedestal 5-inch M1900 guns and was located to the west of Fort Rodman. Unfortunately, the interior of this battery is inaccessible and can only be viewed and explored from the outside. Still, it is yet another fascinating, intact Endicott period battery, well worth a stop. Directly next to it is Battery Craig, also constructed in 1902 and named for Presley O. Craig. This battery had 2 masking parapet 3-inch M1898 guns, also located to the west of Fort Rodman. Once again, Battery Craig's interior is completely inaccessible, only viewable from the exterior. Nonetheless, it's still another interesting battery to witness and see up close. Battery Gaston was the final Endicott period battery built, constructed in 1902, and named for William Gaston. This battery also had 2 masking parapet 3-inch M1898 guns, but this one is located to the northeast of Fort Rodman, beside Battery Walcott. This is yet another inaccessible battery that is completely sealed shut, but the exterior is still explorable and absolutely fascinating to see. Each battery offers incredible coastal views from up top, and they're all worth a visit to soak in the history and beauty. By 1917, the United States had officially entered World War I, plunging Fort Rodman into a new wartime period. Due to the heightened demand for artillery on the Western Front in Europe, several guns were removed from Fort Rodman, specifically from Battery Cross in 1917 for use on a transport ship, and from Battery Walcott and Barden in 1918, although the latter 2 were quickly remounted without seeing service. Upon American entry into World War I, yet another battery was constructed on the premises to further solidify the fort's defenses. Built between 1917 and 1921, this new, modernized battery, Battery Milliken, was named after Alfred S. Milliken, and had 2 12-inch M1895 guns on long-range barbettes. Battery Milliken sits much farther away from the other batteries, northwest of Fort Rodman. This is also by far the largest battery on the property, with a lot to see inside. There is a long hallway inside the battery that connects each entrance, with several rooms jutting off of the hallway. You can see as I make my way down this dark, damp hallway that it goes on and on for quite some time. In fact, Some rooms led to even more hallways, connecting to other rooms. It was truly like a labyrinth in there. The battery consisted of power stations, chemical units, plotting rooms, radio operations, and more. Each of the two main entrances into Battery Milliken are marked by a wide open room with a massive concrete overhang above it. If you're familiar with other abandoned forts I've covered here on this channel, then you'll definitely recognize this structural layout, which is nearly identical. The entirety of the battery is covered in earth and is partially obscured from the outside. Through the late 1930s and 1940s, as World War II began raging in Europe, Fort Rodman received several upgrades and improvements to ensure the site's modernization during wartime. In 1938, a new, unnamed battery was constructed on the property, hosting two 155mm guns on Panama mounts. You can actually still see the concrete platforms left behind from these gun mounts, situated in between batteries Craig and Cross. By 1940, Fort Rodman saw many temporary buildings and structures being built, including barracks for troops. That same year, as America's entry into World War II was just on the horizon, Fort Rodman was garrisoned by the 23rd Coast Artillery Regiment. Other upgrades included two new observation stations built on top of Battery Milliken in 1943, and defensive sea mines being laid out in the harbor, with a mine storehouse converted in 1940. By the end of World War II, Fort Rodman entered a period of disarmament and liquidation. In 1946, all batteries were deactivated, and by 1948, all guns on site were disarmed and removed. Since then, the site has changed hands several times, seeing a variety of uses. The site was briefly used for Army Reserve training during the Vietnam War, before officially closing in the 1970s. The property was partially sold to the city of New Bedford, and eventually opened to the public. It was also in the 1970s when the Friends of Fort Taber were formed, with the intent to preserve the fort's grounds for public enjoyment and education. Fort Rodman itself, however, has remained closed to the public since 2016, completely locked and inaccessible. Fort Taber Park today is a wonderful public park with much to see and do. Aside from the numerous military ruins left behind from the days of Fort Rodman's service, the park also offers a playground for children, many walking and biking paths, and a variety of monuments and memorials related to the fort, as well as New Bedford's rich military history. The Fort Taber Historical Association Museum is also located in the park, open from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. There are also other interesting relics around the park to see, from this World War II era M4 Sherman tank used during a D-Day rehearsal in 1944, to this concrete remnant of a wastewater treatment plant behind Fort Rodman. In fact, there is still a massive wastewater treatment plant in the park, operating to this day. Of course, one of the best assets found at Fort Taber Park is its beautiful coastal views, including a public beach and a fishing pier. Another landmark at Fort Taber Park I'd like to briefly point out is Clark's Point Light, which is actually located inside Fort Rodman itself. Clark's Point Light originally began as a 42-foot tall freestanding lighthouse in New Bedford, built in 1804 and renovated in 1818, before being moved to nearby Fort Rodman in 1869. Interestingly, the old stone tower was left behind before being demolished in 1906. Clark's Point Light, meanwhile, remained active until 1898, when it was deactivated in favor of the new Butler Flats Light, built off the coast from the site that same year. It wouldn't be until 2001 when Clark's Point Light was relit. Today, it now stands at 68 feet tall. Overall, Fort Taber Park is a must-see destination in New Bedford, and one of the best preserved public military forts here in New England. I've been here many times in the past, but I'm glad I was finally able to document it on film for you all. Hey, thank you guys for joining me. I've been Jay Mass as always, and this has been another dope New England adventure. And today we explored Fort Taber Park here in beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts. There were a lot of old abandoned fortification ruins to explore here. Fort Taber, Fort Rodman, especially all of the batteries of Fort Rodman. In fact, I'm standing on one right now. I mean, these batteries are so fascinating. You can see the turrets where the guns once were. You can see the inside of some of these batteries, the hallways, the many rooms. You can walk all over them. Such a cool site. And again, it's all open to the public. Fort Taber Park is a public park. You can come here, explore anything, see what they have to offer. If you're ever in the New Bedford area, I would highly recommend giving Fort Taber a visit. I mean, it's incredible for the history, for everything left behind. I also got to say, it's a beautiful place. You get some excellent seaside views. You're right at the southern tip of New Bedford, so you get some amazing ocean shots. It's just an incredible place. I love Fort Taber Park. Been here dozens of times. But I did see a lot of stuff for the first time today, and I really enjoyed walking through, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. The abandoned ruins of Fort Taber and Fort Rodman. As always, guys, my name's been Jay Mass. If you love urban exploration, checking out abandoned sites, traveling New England and beyond, I'm always doing that on this channel, so feel free to subscribe to the channel. Of course, I do want to give a shout out to all my channel members. You can see them all right here. You guys are awesome, and I'd love it if you too, a viewer of this video, would consider becoming a channel member as well. You'd be supporting me and the channel directly. Or you can follow me on Instagram at JMassOfficial. That's at JMassOfficial. But I've been JMass as always, abandoned Fort Rodman and Fort Taber here in Fort Taber Park, New Bedford, Massachusetts. A spot that I've gotten many requests on for years now, and I finally came and filmed it. So, you know, I really don't know what other forts I'm missing in New England, but let me know down below what the next one I should cover is. All right, catch you guys later. See ya.